You are welcome to my YouTube channel. If you enjoy my stories, kindly subscribe and share this video with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. Thank you. Enjoy your new story.
My name is Grace Bennett. I am 28 years old and a baker by profession. The day my fiancé, Liam, told me he wanted to find himself, I thought it was a joke. We were sitting in our favorite cafe, the one where he first proposed to me and told me he loved me. His hands trembled as he stirred his coffee, eyes refusing to meet mine. "Grace," he said softly, "I can't do this wedding. Not now. I need time to figure out who I am." My heart didn't just break, it folded in on itself. The invitations were printed. The venue was paid for. My dress hung in the closet like a promise that suddenly meant nothing. I remember nodding, unable to speak, as tears blurred the world around me. That night, I sat in bed surrounded by wedding favors, tiny jars of homemade jam I'd spent weeks making. I stared at them until morning, feeling as if each jar was a piece of me he'd left unopened. The whispers started in town a day later. People said he got cold feet. Some said he'd found someone else. I didn't defend him. I didn't defend myself either. I just worked. I baked until my hands ached, until the scent of cinnamon and sugar became my only comfort. But I told myself something quietly, something I barely believed. Maybe losing him wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was the start of another one. And then 3 days later, I met the man who would unknowingly change my life forever. He first appeared outside my bakery on a rainy Thursday. He was old, perhaps in his 70s, wearing a coat that had seen too many winters. His beard was white and wild, his shoes worn thin. He sat beneath the awning, shielding himself from the drizzle, and smiled faintly as I passed him carrying trays of bread. "Smells like heaven," he said, voice hoarse but warm. I smiled back, though my heart was still heavy. "Would you like a piece?" I asked. His eyes widened as if I'd offered him gold. "You'd share that with me?" "Bread is meant to be shared," I replied, handing him a roll. He took it carefully, like something sacred, and whispered, "Thank you, dear." The next day he came again, sitting quietly, watching the morning traffic. I brought him tea that time. He didn't talk much, but he listened. There was something peaceful about him, like he carried stories he'd never tell. People noticed, of course. A few customers frowned, some whispered. One woman even said, "Grace, you'll scare business away feeding strangers." I only smiled. If kindness scares people, maybe I'm in the wrong business. He chuckled when he heard that. "Keep that heart of yours," he said. "The world's short on people like you." At the time, I thought he was just being kind. I didn't know those words would echo back a year later in the most unexpected way imaginable. The old man's visits became part of my daily rhythm. Every morning, I'd set aside a roll and a cup of tea for him. Sometimes we'd talk about the weather, sometimes about the past. He never shared his name, and I never asked. I just called him Sir, and he called me Miss Sunshine. He'd tell me things like, "You bake with your heart, not your hands," or "Not everyone who leaves is meant to come back." I didn't know how he could see so clearly into me, but his words felt like healing in disguise. One afternoon, as I handed him a piece of apple pie, he asked, "If you could change one thing about your past, what would it be?" I thought for a moment. Maybe I wouldn't have trusted someone so easily. He nodded. "Or maybe," he said gently, "you'd trust yourself more." That stayed with me. When he left that day, he turned back at the door and smiled. "You're stronger than you know, Miss Sunshine." It rained heavily that night, and I hoped he found shelter somewhere warm. The next morning, his spot outside the bakery was empty. So was the one after. And the next. A quiet worry began to build inside me. Days passed. Then weeks. And then one morning, when I opened the bakery early, I saw an envelope tucked under the door, sealed with a hand-drawn symbol of a sun. My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope. The paper was rough, slightly damp from the morning dew. Inside was a folded note written in shaky handwriting. It read, "Sometimes, what's lost is only preparing you for what's meant to be found." That was it. No name. No address. Just that one line. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Was it from him? Why leave a message instead of saying goodbye? I asked around, but no one had seen him. It was as if he'd simply vanished into thin air. That night, I tucked the note inside my recipe book, right beside my grandmother's old bread recipe, the one I used when I felt broken inside. Every time I baked, I'd glance at it and feel this strange mix of sadness and hope. Months passed. My bakery grew busier. People started calling it the heart oven because, as one customer said, everything here tastes like love. I didn't tell them it was grief, not love, that flavored my recipes. And though I smiled again, there were moments, quiet, sudden ones, when I missed that old man's calm voice. Then one day, almost a year after Liam left, a letter came in the mail. It was addressed to Miss Grace Bennett, the Heart Oven Bakery. Inside was a formal invitation that read, "The Horizon Foundation cordially invites you to our annual gala honoring unsung hearts in the community." At the bottom was a familiar hand-drawn sun. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That same sun, the symbol from the old man's note, was now printed on embossed paper with gold trim. The letter went on, "Your kindness has not gone unnoticed. Please join us at the Horizon Estate, Saturday evening, 7 p.m. Attire formal." My heart pounded as I read it again and again. Who had nominated me? And what did the symbol mean? When I told my friend Mia, she laughed. "Grace, it's probably one of those fancy fundraisers looking for donations. Don't get your hopes up." But something about it felt different, personal, almost secret. I spent the next 2 days debating whether to go. Part of me still feared being the center of attention. The other part whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was connected to the man who'd vanished. On Saturday evening, I slipped into a simple blue dress, the same one I'd bought for what should have been my honeymoon dinner. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself, not broken anymore, just waiting. When I arrived at the estate, my breath caught. The gates were tall and gilded, the garden blooming with lights like stars fallen to earth. People in elegant clothes drifted through the courtyard, laughter mingling with violin music. As I stepped through the grand doors, a hostess led me by the golden lanterns leading me down the hall. I followed the lanterns through a long corridor lined with paintings of sunrises, each one more radiant than the last. Soft music floated through the air, blending with the scent of lilies. Every step I took made my pulse quicken. At the end of the hallway stood a man in a black suit, smiling politely. "Miss Bennett," he said, as if he'd been expecting me. "Right this way." He led me into a grand ballroom filled with people dressed in shimmering gowns and tuxedos. Crystal chandeliers hung above like frozen fireworks. On the stage, a banner read, "Horizon Foundation, honoring hearts that inspire." Waiters moved between tables, offering glasses of champagne. My hands were trembling, so I clasped them together to hide it. I didn't know anyone there, and yet, I felt as though I'd stepped into a chapter of my own story. "Grace Bennett," a woman's voice asked from behind me. I turned to see a kind-faced lady holding a clipboard. "We're so honored you could make it. The chairman personally requested your presence tonight." "The chairman?" I echoed. She smiled mysteriously. "You'll soon find out." As the lights dimmed and the host took the stage, I found a seat near the back. He began announcing names of award recipients, teachers, nurses, volunteers, people who'd quietly changed lives. But then he said something that froze me in place. "Tonight we honor one more name, someone whose small acts of kindness touched a life in ways she could never have imagined." And before I could process it, I heard my own name echo through the hall. Applause filled the room. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the host's next words. "Grace Bennett," he continued, "the Heart Oven Bakery, for her compassion, generosity, and humble service to her community." A spotlight found me. Every instinct screamed to hide, but a gentle usher encouraged me toward the stage. My steps felt weightless and heavy all at once. When I reached the podium, the host handed me a small glass trophy shaped like a sunrise. "You remind us," he said warmly, "that kindness doesn't need a stage to shine." The audience applauded again, but I was too overwhelmed to speak. I whispered a soft thank you, then looked around the room, and that's when I saw him. At the edge of the crowd, standing in the shadows, was Liam. His hair was shorter, his face more lined, but those eyes, the same ones that once held my world, were unmistakable. For a moment, I thought I was seeing a ghost. He looked stunned, almost proud. Then the lights shifted, and he disappeared into the crowd. My heart was a storm. Why was he here? How did he even know about this event? As I stepped down from the stage, the lady with the clipboard approached again. "Miss Bennett, the chairman would like to meet you privately after the ceremony." "The chairman?" I repeated again, my voice trembling. She nodded. "He said you'd understand once you see him." And for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my old friend, the quiet man outside my bakery, was somehow behind all of this. The ceremony ended with music and chatter, but I barely heard any of it. My mind was spinning, between seeing Liam again and the strange invitation from the chairman, I felt like I was living someone else's dream. A staff member guided me through another corridor, quieter this time, until we reached a set of double doors marked private office. He opened them gently. He's waiting inside. I stepped in, my heels clicking on polished marble floors. The room smelled faintly of wood and lavender. At the far end stood a large portrait, the same sun symbol painted behind a smiling old man. My breath caught. It was him, the man from outside my bakery. Before I could move closer, a deep voice spoke from behind the desk. He always said you'd come. A tall man in his 40s rose to his feet. I'm Jonathan Miles, he said, extending a hand. The old man you knew was my father, Henry Miles, founder of the Horizon Foundation. I felt my knees weaken. Your father? Henry? But he never told me. Jonathan smiled softly. He didn't tell anyone much, Miss Bennett. After his illness worsened, he liked to wander. Said he wanted to see kindness in its purest form. That's when he met you. Tears welled in my eyes as he handed me a folded piece of paper. He asked me to give you this. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a note written in the same shaky handwriting I'd seen before. Grace, you reminded me that goodness still lives quietly in the world. If you're reading this, it means I've found peace, and I hope you have too. I covered my mouth, fighting back tears. And then Jonathan said something that made my heart stop. There's one more thing. My father wasn't the only one you touched. Someone else wanted to see you tonight. Jonathan walked me down a narrow hallway that opened into a garden strung with fairy lights. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine. At the center of the garden stood Liam, waiting. For a second, neither of us moved. The last time I'd seen him, he was breaking our future apart. Now he stood there looking humbled, unsure, older somehow. Grace, he said quietly, stepping forward. You look radiant. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was confusion. Why are you here, Liam? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I was a fool. After I left, everything fell apart. I tried to find myself, like I told you, but all I found was emptiness. I ended up working at this foundation months ago, helping with outreach projects. I didn't know until recently that you were the Grace Bennett, the one who helped Henry Miles. He looked down, voice cracking. He used to talk about you, you know. Said you had the kind of kindness that didn't expect anything back. I never understood what he meant until I lost you. My throat tightened. You didn't just lose me, Liam. You gave me up. He nodded. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of rustling leaves. Then he whispered, I didn't come tonight to ask for anything. I just wanted to thank you for teaching me what love really looks like. The words hit me like soft thunder. Before I could reply, Jonathan reappeared at the doorway. Grace, there's something else my father arranged before he passed. He wanted you to see it. Jonathan led us to another part of the estate, a small glass building overlooking the gardens. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and paper. He handed me a key. This, he said, was your friend's final project, the Horizon Kitchen. It's meant to feed children and families in need, completely free. He wanted you to run it. I stared at him, speechless. Me? He nodded. He chose you, Grace. Said you were the one person he trusted to turn compassion into action. Tears blurred my vision as I stepped inside. Rows of shiny ovens lined the walls, each one engraved with tiny suns. A mural on the far wall showed a woman handing bread to a child beneath a rising sun. My face, painted in soft strokes. I turned to Jonathan, overwhelmed. He remembered everything. He did, Jonathan said gently. He told me that some people bake to earn a living, but you bake to heal others. He wanted that to continue. Behind me, I heard Liam's quiet voice. Looks like he saw what I was too blind to see. I turned slowly. Maybe some lessons come late. He nodded. If you'll let me, I'd like to help. Not to fix the past, just to build something good. For the first time in a long while, I smiled. Then we'll start with bread. Jonathan laughed softly. He'd like that. As I looked out through the glass at the glowing lanterns beyond, I realized something. The note he'd left wasn't just about him. It was about life itself. What's lost truly does prepare you for what's meant to be found. The next morning, I stood inside the Horizon Kitchen, sunlight spilling through the glass ceiling. Everything was spotless and new, rows of ovens gleaming, flower jars perfectly stacked. But beneath the beauty was a quiet fear twisting inside me. Could I really do this? Run a foundation project? Feed hundreds? I was just a small-town baker, not some trained philanthropist. Jonathan must have sensed my hesitation. You don't need to know everything at once, he said gently. You just have to start. So I did. That first week, I gathered a small group of volunteers, students, retirees, and a few single mothers from the neighborhood. We cooked simple meals, soups, loaves, pies. The laughter in that kitchen felt like a heartbeat. Still, some people in town whispered. They said I only got the position because of pity or publicity. Others thought I was pretending to be noble. Their words stung, but I kept baking anyway. One afternoon, as I packed bread for delivery, a woman I'd never met approached me. She looked exhausted, her little boy clinging to her skirt. Are you Grace Bennett? She asked. Yes, I said, wiping flour from my hands. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You don't know us, but the meals you send to the shelter, they've been keeping us going. She handed me a small card drawn by her son, a smiling sun over a loaf of bread. That night, I placed the drawing next to Henry's note in my recipe book. For the first time, I felt peace replacing the ache. By the third month, the Horizon Kitchen had become more than just a project. It was a movement. Local farmers donated produce. Bakeries sent ingredients. Volunteers came in droves. But not everyone celebrated. A local newspaper ran a headline that made my stomach drop. Runaway bride turns charity star. Is it genuine or guilt? The article hinted that I was using charity work to escape heartbreak, that my story was a publicity stunt. When I walked through town the next day, I could feel the stares. Someone even muttered, "She's just acting holy for attention." That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, lights dim, the hum of the ovens keeping me company. For the first time in months, I cried, not because of the past, but because goodness always seemed to need defending. Then I heard footsteps. Liam stood in the doorway, holding a tray of fresh bread. I thought you might have skipped dinner, he said softly. I tried to smile. You shouldn't see me like this. Grace, he said, placing the tray down. I've seen you broken, brave, and everything in between. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. I looked up at him, and for a moment, I saw the boy who once dreamed with me. But then I reminded myself, dreams change. Still, his presence brought quiet comfort. As he turned to leave, he said, Henry used to say, light never argues with darkness. It just shines. Maybe it's time you stop defending and start shining again. The words lifted me like wind beneath wings. Inspired by Liam's words, I began focusing less on rumors and more on purpose. Every week, we hosted community nights, free meals, storytelling, music. Families came from miles away, laughter replacing whispers. One evening, an elderly woman joined us, sitting alone by the corner. Her hands trembled as she ate. When I brought her extra pie, she looked at me with teary eyes. You remind me of someone, she whispered. A man who used to sit by the bus stop, handing candy to children. I froze. What was his name? She thought for a moment. Henry, I think. Henry Miles. He used to tell people that love's worth isn't proven in moments of comfort, but in moments of loss. My throat tightened. She smiled faintly. He'd be proud of you. After she left, I stood outside watching the sky fade to gold. The sun symbol seemed to follow me everywhere, on walls, on drawings, and stories. Later that week, Jonathan invited me to attend the Foundation's quarterly board meeting. There's something important we need to discuss, he said. When I arrived, the room was tense. Papers were spread across the table, numbers highlighted in red. Jonathan sighed. Grace, the Foundation's main sponsor, is withdrawing. Without funding, Horizon Kitchen could close within 2 months. My heart sank. There must be something we can do. He hesitated. There might be, but it involves revisiting something personal. Something about Liam. Liam sat beside me as Jonathan explained. The sponsor pulling out is from Larchwood Industries, Jonathan said. They claim they've lost confidence in the Foundation's leadership after seeing that tabloid article about Grace. I clenched my fists. So they believe gossip more than good work? Liam looked uneasy. Their CEO, Mr. Caldwell, was once my mentor. I worked under him before everything fell apart. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Would he take your call? Liam hesitated. Maybe. But I burned that bridge when I left the company. Silence filled the room. Then I said quietly, then we rebuild it. Liam glanced at me, surprised. Grace, this isn't your fight. It is, I replied. If Horizon Kitchen closes, all these families lose hope. Henry believed in me. I won't let him down. The next morning, we drove to the Larchwood headquarters. The receptionist eyed us skeptically, but eventually ushered us into a sleek office overlooking the city. Mr. Caldwell looked older, his eyes sharp. "So," he said, "the runaway groom and the broken bride want to talk business." I swallowed hard. "We're not here about the past. We're here because hundreds of families depend on the Foundation's kitchen. It's not about reputation, it's about survival." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned forward. "You sound like Henry." "Because he taught me," I said simply. He studied me, then finally said, "You'll have my answer tomorrow." As we left the building, Liam exhaled. "I think he'll reconsider." But something in his voice made me wonder if that yes would come with a price. The next day felt endless. Every phone ring made my pulse jump. Volunteers asked for updates. Jonathan tried to stay optimistic, but I saw the worry in his eyes. By late afternoon, the call came. I put it on speaker. "Miss Bennett," Mr. Caldwell said, his tone unreadable. "I'll reinstate funding, on one condition." "What condition?" I asked cautiously. He paused. "The project's public face must be someone else. Someone the media won't target. You can still run it behind the scenes, but no public recognition. No interviews. No speeches." The words stung. My throat tightened. "So I'm good enough to do the work, just not to be seen doing it?" "It's the only way to protect the Foundation," he replied simply. I looked at Jonathan. He stayed silent. Liam's jaw clenched. Finally, I said, "If stepping back keeps those children fed, then so be it." After the call ended, the room was quiet. Liam broke it softly. "You shouldn't have to hide, Grace." I smiled faintly. Sometimes light shines brightest where no one's watching. That night, as I walked home under the stars, I thought about Henry, about Liam, about everything that had led me here. When I unlocked the bakery door, a small envelope lay on the counter. No return address, just that same sun symbol. Inside was a single line, written in Henry's familiar hand. "You're almost there, Miss Sunshine. When the world turns its eyes away, that's when your story begins to glow." My breath caught. He had planned this long before he was gone. And somehow I knew the biggest revelation was still ahead. Stepping away from the spotlight was harder than I thought. I kept baking, planning menus, and organizing events, but now others spoke for me. My name was never mentioned. My face vanished from posters. I was invisible in the story I had built. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that the work was all that counted. But late at night, as I washed the same mixing bowls Henry once used, doubt crept in. One evening, I found Liam waiting outside the bakery. He handed me a folder. "These were among Henry's archived files," he said. "You should see this." Inside were letters, all addressed to the woman who gave without asking. They were written in Henry's careful handwriting, each dated months before I even met him. "How is that possible?" I whispered. Liam shrugged. "He must have known about you long before the day at the bench." My pulse quickened. Henry had always seemed to know more than he should, about me, about Liam, even about the Foundation's future. As I turned the pages, I noticed one letter sealed with the same sun symbol. I opened it with trembling hands. "Grace, when you read this, you'll have already done what many only dream of, turning pain into purpose. But know this, everything I built for the day you'd arrive. The world needs what you carry." Tears blurred my vision. I sank into the nearest chair. "He chose me," I whispered. Before he even met me. Liam placed a hand on my shoulder. He saw something the world ignored. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Henry's voice in my mind, gentle, amused, certain. Sometimes, what's lost is only preparing you for what's meant to be found. Days later, Jonathan called a sudden meeting. When I entered the boardroom, he and Liam were already there, faces tight with concern. "Grace," Jonathan began carefully, "there's something you need to know about Henry's will." My heart skipped. "His will?" He nodded. "You weren't just chosen to lead the project. Henry legally made you the successor trustee of his private foundation, the entire Horizon Trust." I froze. That can't be right. I'm just a baker. Jonathan handed me a folder of legal papers. "It's all here. He made the change a year before his passing, right after visiting your town for a community fair." My mind spun back. That fair was the one I had catered for free, when my life was still unraveling. Liam exhaled. "He must have seen you that day." I gripped the table's edge. "Why wouldn't he tell me?" Jonathan looked down. "Because he didn't want you to feel indebted. He wanted you to earn it through kindness, not status." The words hit like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Still, I felt unsteady. What does it mean now? It means, Jonathan said quietly, you have full control over the foundation's future. The board will support whatever direction you choose. Silence filled the room. For a moment, I saw the full circle of it all. Heartbreak, humility, hope. I don't want power, I said finally. I want purpose. Liam smiled faintly. Then that's exactly why he chose you. When I left the building, the city looked different. Not bigger, but more alive. And for the first time since my wedding was called off, I felt chosen again. Not by love that broke, but by legacy that healed. I spent the next week studying everything Henry had left behind, his journals, sketches, and notes. His handwriting danced between philosophy and practicality. One entry caught my attention. The greatest inheritance isn't money, but continuity. Kindness passed on is a kind of immortality. It was like he'd written it just for me. But among the notes, I found something unexpected, a list titled Unfinished Seeds. It contained names of communities, all underdeveloped towns across the country. Next to one of them was my hometown, Willow Creek. Henry had circled it twice. I stared at it for a long time before whispering. He wanted me to go back. That night, I told Jonathan and Liam. They both looked surprised. You think he meant for you to continue the work there? Liam asked. I know he did, I replied. That's where it began, where I learned to give, even when I had nothing. So we planned quietly. The next month, the Horizon Trust would open its second branch, Horizon Home, in Willow Creek. When I returned to town, people who once whispered about me now came forward with tears and hugs. Even Mrs. Holbrook, who'd once called me the foolish bride, pressed my hands and said, We were wrong about you, dear. You taught us what grace looks like. That night, I stood in front of the new kitchen sign, my name not on it, but my heart in every brick. The air smelled of bread and second chances. And though I didn't know it yet, the next morning would bring the one person I never expected to see again. The next morning, as we prepared for the grand opening of Horizon Home, I turned and nearly dropped the basket I was carrying. Liam stood by the entrance, speaking to someone, and that someone was Daniel. For a moment, time froze. The man who had once broken my heart years back before I met Liam now stood in front of me, eyes filled with something between guilt and awe. Grace, he said quietly, I didn't expect to find you here. I took a steady breath. Neither did I. He smiled faintly, awkwardly. I saw the news. The kitchen, the foundation. It's incredible. Thank you, I said simply. He looked around, almost lost. I came back because I realized I'd spent a year finding myself and ended up losing the best part of me. The old ache tried to rise, but I kept my composure. We all lose things, Daniel. The question is what we do afterward. He nodded, swallowing hard. You've changed. I had to, I said softly. Pain can either close you or grow you. I chose the latter. He hesitated, then added, If you ever need help. I smiled, gentle but firm. We're doing fine. But thank you. When he walked away, I felt no anger, only release. The chapter had finally closed. Later, Liam found me by the doorway. You okay? Yes, I said. For the first time, truly. He grinned. Then maybe it's time we stop living in what was lost and start living in what's been found. And when the ribbon was cut that afternoon, the crowd's cheer felt like a new heartbeat for the town, for me. A month later, Horizon Home flourished. Every morning, laughter echoed from the kitchen. Children helped stir dough. Elderly couples taught recipes from memory. But there was one final mystery left. Henry's letters had hinted at one last surprise. One evening, Jonathan arrived carrying a small wooden box. This was found in Henry's personal safe, he said. It's addressed to you. Inside was a small golden key and a note. Grace, I built my life on giving, but you taught me why. Go to the old bench where we first met. The next morning, I went to the park. The same bench, the same quiet air. I slid the key into a tiny compartment built into the bench's armrest. It opened with a soft click. Inside was a miniature glass orb. Inside it, a tiny sun made of gold leaf. And beneath it, one last line. You were never being tested. You were being trusted. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I sat for a long time, holding that orb, feeling Henry's presence like a whisper in the breeze. When I looked up, the horizon was streaked with pink and gold. Everything, the heartbreak, the kindness, the letters, even the silence, had led here. It wasn't about loss anymore. It was about legacy. And as I walked back to Horizon Home, I finally understood what Henry had meant all along. that when love gives, it never truly disappears. It just changes form. The following few weeks felt like sunrise after a long night. Every day, the bakery at Horizon Home filled with people whose laughter carried the weight of healed hearts. The children called me Miss Grace of the Oven, a title that made me laugh until tears rolled down my cheeks. Liam became a steady presence, quietly fixing things, staying late to help count supplies, teaching the older volunteers how to use the new ovens. He never asked for anything, yet always seemed to appear exactly when I needed someone to lean on. One afternoon, I caught him watching the children roll dough. His smile was small but genuine, the kind that came from peace, not pride. "You've built something beautiful," he said. I corrected. "You've been here every step." He shook his head. "No. You showed us all that kindness doesn't end where heartbreak begins." I wanted to say more, but the moment felt sacred, quiet, warm enough. That evening, I placed Henry's sun orb on the bakery counter. The golden light caught the window's glow, scattering it across the room like a blessing. People often came in just to look at it. "Is it real gold?" a boy once asked. "Maybe," I said, smiling. "But what matters is what it reminds us of, that when you share light, you never lose any of your own." He nodded thoughtfully, and I realized Henry's message had taken root. As the day closed, I watched the last of the sunlight fade and whispered, "Thank you, Henry. You found me so I could help others find themselves." And somewhere in that whisper, I heard peace. The next morning brought an unexpected letter. It came from the city, embossed with the Horizon Foundation's seal. Inside was an invitation, the annual Benefactors Gala, honoring the legacy of Henry Caldwell and the work of Grace Bennett. My heart skipped. It was the same foundation where everything began, the place I'd once walked into trembling, unsure of my worth. Liam read the invitation over my shoulder. "You'll be speaking this time," he said with a grin. "Me? No." I laughed nervously. "I don't do well with speeches." He smiled. "You'll do fine. Just speak from the same heart that built all this." The gala was 2 weeks away, and those days flew by in a blur of nerves and excitement. I didn't have an expensive gown or jewelry, just a simple dress I'd sewn months ago for a town event that never happened. When the night finally arrived, the ballroom glittered under soft golden lights. People I'd once only read about, investors, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, filled the room. As I stepped to the stage, I felt the same humility that once made me hide behind kindness. But this time, I didn't feel small. I spoke of Henry, of his belief in quiet hearts, of the power of unnoticed goodness, of how a loaf of bread could feed more than hunger. When I finished, the room stood still for a moment, then rose to its feet in applause. Liam's eyes met mine from the crowd, proud and gentle. In that instant, I knew. This was never about fame or recognition. It was about legacy that whispers rather than shouts. And that whisper had become a chorus. After the gala, something unexpected happened. A young woman approached me backstage, eyes glistening. "Miss Bennett," she said softly, "I used to work at a diner near your bakery. One day, you gave me bread when I hadn't eaten all day. That kindness kept me going." She handed me a folded note. Inside were 4 words. "Now I'll pass it on." I stood there speechless as she walked away. That moment hit harder than the applause, the lights, or the honors. Later, in the quiet of the evening, Liam found me outside, sitting beneath the twinkling lights strung along the terrace. "She reminded me of you," he said. "How so?" "She's starting over, with courage and grace. Just like you did." I smiled. "It's strange, isn't it? The things we lose often lead us exactly where we belong." He nodded, then reached into his coat pocket. "I've been meaning to give you this." It was a small silver pendant, shaped like a sun. "For the light you gave us," he said quietly. For a moment, words failed me. I simply looked at him, at the man who had stood beside me, patient, unwavering, never asking for more than my peace. And maybe that was the moment I realized, not all love announces itself with grand promises. Some just waits, steady and sure, until the heart is ready to see it. Weeks passed, and life at Horizon Home continued to grow. We built new wings, trained volunteers, and started scholarship programs in Henry's name. The small bakery that began as an act of survival had become a symbol of renewal. One evening, as I was locking up, Liam appeared with 2 cups of tea. "You still overwork," he teased gently. I smiled. Old habits die hard. He leaned against the doorway. "You know, Henry once told me that the kindest people often forget they deserve kindness too." I looked at him puzzled. He said that to you? Liam nodded. A week before he passed. He told me to stay close to the light I found. I think he meant you. Something in my chest softened. He saw further than both of us. We stood in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets, laughter from the nearby park, the faint hum of peace. Then Liam said quietly, "Grace, I know your heart's been through enough. But if ever there's room in it again, I'll be here. No rush. Just truth." I met his gaze, steady and kind. "Thank you," I whispered. And as I closed the door that night, I felt it. Not the rush of romance, but the quiet beginning of something real. Something time wouldn't need to test. A year later, Horizon Homes celebrated its first anniversary. The same park bench where I once met Henry had been moved to the new building's courtyard, a living reminder of where it all began. The children planted sunflowers around it, their faces lit with pride. I stood before them, holding the golden orb in my hands. "This belonged to the man who believed kindness never dies," I said. "He taught me that what we give has a way of coming back, often in forms we don't expect." The children listened wide-eyed, and I placed the orb on the bench. "From now on," I said, "let this belong to everyone who chooses to give." Applause rippled softly through the courtyard. When I turned, Liam was there, smiling, his hands in his pockets. The look in his eyes wasn't grand or dramatic. It was simply peace, shared, mutual, certain. As the sun set behind us, the bench gleamed gold, and the air carried the scent of fresh bread and blooming sunflowers. I took a deep breath, letting the moment settle inside me. The pain, the loss, the unanswered questions, all had become part of the same story. Because what was once heartbreak had turned into heritage. And as I looked toward the horizon, I finally understood Henry's final gift. That love, in its truest form, doesn't need to be found again. It only needs to be lived. The end. Thank you for listening to my story. Kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, Randy Revenges, for more inspiring stories. Like and share.